before we head into a little bit of worship, no, that's not it. It's not. No. Okay. Okay. Oh. Good morning, guys. I hope your peak time was good this morning. I don't want to say morning again. Wait. Okay. Good morning, guys. iPad's dying. Okay. Oh, I can't do this. Right. It's like I'm standing with my hands like this. Like, what am I doing? Good morning, guys. I hope your peak time was good this morning. This morning, Rachel, I can't say morning, don't I? Good morning, guys. I hope your peak time was good. This morning, Rachel is going to be sharing with us. And before we head into worship, I am just going to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this morning. I thank you that we have another opportunity to really delve into your word this morning, Father. I pray that you would let our ears and our hearts be attentive to what Rachel has to say. I pray that you would speak to us through her talk, and I pray that we could apply it to our lives this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
My name's Rachel, nice to meet you, and for those of you who already know me, hello. So today we are actually just going to go through the final 2 chapters of Acts. So far we have gone through the whole book of Acts, and we have seen Paul and Silas and many of the other apostles go through some really hard stuff, some really unexpected journeys, and we have seen how the Lord's power has moved throughout all of these circumstances, and that's what the whole book of Acts is about. I think sometimes we're prone to think that it's about Paul or about like his missionary journeys and the faith that he had, but actually the whole of Acts is about God working in power through his people. And yeah, so today we're just going to delve in. So where we left off in the end of chapter 6, we hear that Paul is going to go on a ship. He's been promised by God that he is going to face Caesar, which is Nero. Also, crazy guy, look him up. Really crazy. Yeah, anyway, look him up. But anyway, so he's going to face Nero, and he's been promised and he's been told by God that he's going to do that. So that's where we leave off. So whenever we reach chapter 27 and 28, we kind of expect it to sort of slow down. We kind of expect the book to sort of take a slower pace, and we also expect it to kind of like give a nice clean wrap up. We kind of we kind of expect to hear about how Paul's talk went with Nero in front of the council. We expect all of these things, just to be told, yes, and a nice neat end. But obviously, life is not nice and neat, and we know throughout Acts that Paul's life was full of twists and turns. And as we delve in deeper into this passage, we will see that there is many twists and turns in this story. And in fact, the whole chapter of 27 is actually about just Paul's journey on the ship. But we'll get back to that in a minute. But this is why, and we found it very applicable, that this talk is called God in the Unexpected. And what a perfect time to talk about unexpected events than in the midst of our global pandemic. A couple of months ago, I suppose a good wee while ago now, we were at a senior teens reunion, and we were looking into 2020 and looking forward to all the things that we were going to do in obviously 2020. And we were looking to see, so excited about the formal that we were going to go to, maybe that fun holiday, the dreaded exams, starting uni, and all of these things have kind of felt like they've gone up in the air. And all of a sudden, over a matter of a couple of weeks, our life unexpectedly came to a halt. We may have had new and added anxieties in our lives. Maybe we have family members that are not so well, and we worry about this COVID-19 and all the things that bring that kind of stem from that unexpected event. But even if it's COVID-19 or not, our life is filled with events that are unexpected. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good. But today we're going to focus perhaps on the unexpected trials in our life that are seen throughout the story of Acts, and especially, most assuredly, in this chapter, in these 2 chapters of Acts. So why is it that the unexpected things scare us? I know that I get scared at the thought of any new thing happening, or I know whenever COVID came out, I know that a lot of us were very scared and panicking, of course. But I think if we really thought about it, and if we really thought about why the unexpected events scare us, it really comes down to the feeling of loss of control. See, I think these things and these unexpected events and unexpected trials make us realize that actually we have very little control in our life. We don't have very much control in any aspect of our life. We can't control when a loved one dies. We can't control our perhaps financial situation. We can't control even like that exam result that you really worked hard for and you didn't get, and all of a sudden your future seems up the left and you don't really know where to turn from that. It can even be an injury, or a mental health as well can come up, and it can so often make us feel like we are at a loss of control. But God can use these human experiences as a means to reveal his power and sovereignty. You see, I think actually God does these things or reveals our humanness in these things, you know, in the lack of control that we have over our own lives. And I think this world and various other things and what people tell us, we are always kind of assuming, even as Christians, that we are ultimately in control, that no matter what happens, we will be able to deal with it like, you know, we're good. But actually that's not true. One of the central messages of the Bible is God's sovereign control. And not only the big things of our lives, but also the everyday inner workings of our life as well. And this is definitely one of the main things that I really think Luke wants us to think about whenever we are coming to this passage, okay? And yes, I know that we are tempted to read this passage and think, wasn't Paul amazing? And that's so true. Like, Paul's faith was incredible. But I don't want us to just stop there, but I want us to actually look in this passage and see, wow, isn't God incredible? Isn't God so good that he is in control of every aspect of our lives? And so there's just two truths that I really want to bring out of chapter 27 and 28 for us this morning. The first one is nothing happens outside of God's control. So nothing happens in your life, unexpected or expected. Nothing happens without God's control over your life. Nothing is a surprise to God, and what is unexpected for us is not unexpected to him. So in chapter 27, as I said before, we're expecting, you know, for this passage to go a bit easier and to hear Paul speak to Nero and you know, to see that happen. But actually, as we reach chapter 27, we realize that it's a bit crazy. Chapter 27, Luke goes into major detail about Paul's voyage to Rome. So he gets on this ship, and it says that there are around 270 people, or 79 people on this ship, the majority of which are prisoners, sailors, and soldiers as well. And from the get-go, it's obviously a broken, from what our perspective is, going to be quite a strenuous journey. And, you know, we just kind of assume that he's going to get in this boat, that there's going to be a few wee details, and then he'll just move on to Rome. But actually, from what we discover, Paul ends up being in a shipwreck. He ends up being in a storm. And this is not just any storm. Like, this is a storm that actually Luke goes into so much detail about, which, honestly, read it for yourselves, okay, guys? Like I'm expecting y'all to read it because, like, it's really, really good, and, like, it's so detailed, and there's so much in it, so just read it for yourselves, too. Don't take my word for it. Never do that. Okay, look it up for yourselves. But we soon find out that actually this is not just any ordinary storm. This is a storm that causes the sailors to lose hope. So these are men of the sea. They know what they are at. Like, they've done this time and time again, okay? They know what they're doing. But it comes to the point where they're actually on this ship for over 2 weeks. Now, we can read that and be like, oh yeah, okay. But actually, can you actually imagine what that would be like? To be on a shipwreck, to be in the midst of a storm for 2 weeks, that even the professionals around you are panicking. They're literally panicking. And it says, Luke himself says in the passage in 27, that actually they had lost faith, they had lost complete hope of being saved. And we can look at this passage and think, what is going on? So soon we find out that, you know, as we reach chapter 28, so Paul has been through that horrific journey, and the Lord promised him, which is so special. Really look that up, guys. It's such a special thing that the Lord sends an angel down to encourage Paul, but also to tell him that no life will be lost during that time. And the Lord proves his promise true as well. So no lives are lost, and they end up on the shore of Malta. And so you're like, okay, finally, after such a mega storm, 2 and something weeks in the midst of a storm, and they land in Malta, and the people are so kind, and you're like, finally, like a little let up, you know, that's pretty good. You know, Paul and Luke are finally getting a bit of a break here. But actually, we soon discover that as soon as Paul then goes to help them make the fire and stuff, the minute that he moves the logs, a poisonous viper snake, like a poisonous snake comes up and bites Paul. And honestly, we could read this story and be like, what is going on, okay? And I think, honestly, if that was me, my first reaction would maybe be like, really? Like, really, what is actually going on? I've just been on a shipwreck for over 2 weeks, and now you're telling me that I've got a venomous, poisonous snake bite. So we come to this, and we read a story like this, and we are like, was all this really meant to happen? Surely this is a thwart in God's plan. Surely this was not in God's plan. But I want us to actually take a look at Paul here, okay? And how does Paul respond? I just literally love this. In chapter 28, like he just like, all the Maldivians or the people from Malta, they're all like, oh my goodness, like we've seen this before and we've seen it again, like you're gonna die. That's it, you're gonna die. And what does Paul do? He's just like, he just picks it up, takes it out and carries on. And obviously he lives because he is trusting, first and foremost, he is trusting that he knows what the Lord has called him to do. So the Lord has called him to face Nero. So he knows that no matter what happens, that's going to happen. Like no matter what comes his way, that will be his end destination. But actually it can be a really cool way to also for the people of Malta to see that. And they think then that Paul's a god because he doesn't get sick. But then obviously Paul has a great opportunity to share his faith with those people. But why does Paul not freak out, okay? Why do Paul and Luke, in the midst of all of this, surrounded on the boat with people who are panicking and all this going on, why do they not panic? Well, ultimately they knew who controlled the wind and the waves. You see, Paul believed that when God said in Psalm 139:6, all my days have been recorded in your book. All my days have been ordained in your book. You see, Paul and Luke knew that God was in control ultimately and that he had his hand on their lives. You see, God had had a promise given to them. They knew where their end destination was going to be. And guys, you know what? That can be us today. This is so applicable for us. And this is why I want us to look at the passages. And it's so important to actually look at the passage and unfold and see what is God revealing about himself in the passage. And God's character is immense and so incredible. And tomorrow we'll be hearing a bit about his character and his unchangingness as well. But today I really want us to look at God's sovereignty in the midst of this. God's all-controlling power filled with love, power in our lives. You see, Paul, from all this knowledge, how did he get so strong in his faith? Why was his first and automatic reaction just to trust God, just to pull that viper out and just carry on? Because he knew the God who was in control. He clung to the promises of God. He clung to the fact that God is in power, that God can be trusted, that he always, always, always does what he says he will do. And not only is God in control, but he is filled with a love for you. God is so for you. You know, that song's coming to mind, and be still, my soul, the Lord is on your side. And sometimes we can also feel like we are in an unexpected storm of our life. Sometimes we can feel like all those unexpected things, and sometimes it can feel like one thing after another, and we just cannot seem to get a break. Those days where even getting up out of bed seems really difficult. Well, we can look at God in this passage and we can think and we can say, Lord, if you got Paul to the destination that you said you would, you're going to get me to the destination that you also said you would. And guys, that's a reality. If you are a believer, the Lord has promised us many mansions up in heaven. He has told us that our destination is in heaven with him forever. That is the hope that we can cling to. That is our final destination. Now, the Lord doesn't necessarily tell us all the ins and outs and workings and unexpected things of our lives, but he has told us that we can hope and trust and believe him that he will one day bring us to him in heaven. And guys, just even on this, okay, the Lord also loves to bless his people, okay? Sometimes we can look at these trials and think, what's going on? I don't understand, you know, how God can be good. That's an often thing that we hear people say, how can God be good and all these bad things happen to me? So this leads us on to our second point, okay? God and his sovereignty, okay? So God often disguises blessings as trials, okay? So God often disguises blessings as trials. God loves to bless his people, but because he knows that the greatest blessing we can have is him, those trials can be an opportunity to get to know him better, and that is the biggest blessing you will ever receive. So let's actually just put a pause on the story of Paul and Luke and just actually look back to the story of Joseph in Genesis, okay? So Joseph's story is an incredible one. It's one marked with sufferings and trials. So obviously he is sold into slavery by his brothers. He is put in prison. All these crazy things happen to him. He's in prison for a long time. But ultimately, we know the end of Joseph's story. And Joseph actually becomes a prominent person in Egypt during the time of a massive famine. And, you know, we can see, I suppose we can see Joseph's story and think, you know, that is one marked with suffering and strife. And I think if we were in that position, it would be hard. It would be hard, wouldn't it? And today we're not trying to make light of those circumstances, but we're just trying to put them into perspective in light of God. But do not also like mistake whenever what we're saying here, okay? We're not saying that God causes those trials or causes the pain in your life, okay? That's not what we're saying. But we're saying is that the Lord can sometimes use that, okay? We are living in a broken, sinful world, and those painful things and brokenness happens in our life. It's just a part of being and living in a sinful world. But I think actually Joseph himself sums this up really well in Genesis 50, chapter 50, verse 20. And he says, you know, to his brothers, what you intended for evil, the Lord turned out for good. And I think that can be really something that we can cling to know that the Lord doesn't cause our pain, but that he has purpose in it, that the Lord will ultimately bring about a good purpose for those trials. He will bring out a blessing in your life, and that blessing is the Lord. It's a deeper relationship with him. It's more knowledge of who he is, because when we face these trials, we realize that actually there is nothing else we can cling to. There is nothing else that we can look to. We are out of control in those unexpected trials. Well, that's whenever we go to God, isn't it? That's whenever we get stronger in him and we cling to his promises and we learn more about his character, but we also learn how to cling to his character. And I think that's why Paul's faith, I suppose, was so strong. Whenever it came to shipwrecks or facing councils or imprisonment or like viper bites, like he almost was unmovable. But that's because he was clinging to the immovable God. And I think whenever we face trials, it's more about our perspective. And I think if we begin to see the Lord as the one who is sovereign, the one who we can trust, our friend, our Father, the one who ultimately has our good in the midst of these difficult times, I think if we really begin to see that, our perspective will change. You know, it says, whether this, I read this somewhere and I just thought that was really good. I can't remember where I found it, but that's fine. Whether this is a trial or a blessing depends on whether you see it from heaven's perspective. So whether you see the thing in your life, the unexpected trial in your life, whether you see it as a blessing or a trial, is dependent on whether we are fixing our eyes on him. Because from a person, if we are to leave God out of the equation, okay, if we leave him out of the equation, pain and suffering have no purpose. They're just there. But actually, if we put God at the center of them, we know that ultimately he is in control. You know, and we look at Paul's imprisonment and we see all these things, you know, we see the shipwreck and, you know, and guys, I really, really, really would encourage you to really look into this because there's so much encouragement in that. But guys, we can look at Paul's imprisonment and think, you know, of what purpose is that? And, you know, sometimes we can feel like that and we can begin to doubt God's goodness and, you know, become discouraged. But actually, we look at Paul's imprisonment, okay, and we see it, and Paul's imprisonment and his shipwreck, and we see it as an opportunity where he got to share God's goodness, but also an opportunity to lean on the Lord, okay? We need to learn to lean on the Lord, and trials actually make that easier. Sometimes trials make it easier to see the goodness of God because we are now no longer distracted, but we need him. And just in closing, guys, there's just on this, Philippians 1, chapter 12. No, in Philippians chapter 1, verse 12. I'll get there. And Paul's actually talking to the Philippians about his time in prison. And he says, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are so much more bold to speak the word without fear. And guys, you know what? That is Paul speaking from his own experience, okay? Speaking from his own experience of imprisonment and seeing how the Lord had a deep purpose in that, not just in the end, but in the inner workings throughout his life. And guys, I just want to kind of end with, just before you pray, I kind of came across this wee song recently. I'll not sing it, don't worry. But it goes, when trials come, no longer fear, for in the pain our God draws near, to fire a faith worth more than gold, and there his faithfulness is told. So guys, when the unexpected comes, look to him, okay? Know his sovereignty, know his power in your life right now, because trials are not easy. Life is not easy. The Lord never promised us an easy road, but he promised us that he was in control and that he was the one that would go with us, before us, that he would lead the way and that he would be a light unto our feet and a lamp unto our path. So guys, let's just close. God, I just thank you so much for our time this morning, Lord. And God, we thank you for the book of Acts, Lord. And God, we just pray and ask it, Father, that you just do your work in our hearts, Lord, that we see your character as we read your word, Lord. And during our peak times, Father, we pray that you reveal yourself to us, Lord, that we get to know you in a real way, Father. And Father, just as the unexpected arises, Lord, we just pray and ask it, Father, that you become our all in all, Lord. Give us a heavenly perspective, Father. Keep our eyes fixed on you throughout everything, Father. And we just pray that you bless